Hey there and welcome back to another DreamWorks video. And today I want to talk a little bit about How to Train Your Dragon. When it was released in 2010, How to Train Your Dragon was truly a breath of fresh air. Prior to its release, DreamWorks was struggling quite a lot, I think, releasing numerous films that were either bad, forgettable, or did poorly at the box office despite being decent overall. Obviously, there were some exceptions to this trend, such as Kung Fu Panda, which was both a critical and commercial success and spawned an entire franchise that still produces lucrative film and TV to this day. But by 2010, DreamWorks had well and truly passed the golden age of Shrek and Shrek 2, and had become a studio that embodied the phrase, hit or miss. And honestly, if Disney had been releasing better stuff back then, I think we'd look back on them with even more scorn. But since Disney struggled quite a bit until the release of Bolt, which sort of brought them back to releasing consistently good films, DreamWorks does get a little bit of leeway for their stumbles too. But anyway, back on topic, it's safe to say that How to Train Your Dragon really did fire on all cylinders. It got a respectable gross of $494 million and a Rotten Tomatoes score of 99%. And then a sequel followed this up with a $621 million gross and a score of 91%, whilst the third brought in $525 million and a score of 90. Plus, all three films got nominated for Academy Awards for Best Animated Feature. And whilst I think that sometimes the Oscars can be a bit out of touch, at the same time, I think the animated category at least is representative of what is both popular and well made, as opposed to simply being well made. And hell, whilst none of the three films actually ended up winning the award, at least the films they lost to were decent. Toy Story 3, Big Hero 6, Toy Story 4, although Klaus was robbed by Toy Story 4, and it only won because it's a Pixar film, and nothing will ever change my mind on that front. But regardless, the How to Train Your Dragon franchise obviously has done very well for itself, earning a decent chunk of change, and has been consistent in quality compared to a lot of other franchises in DreamWorks' library. So from simply that perspective, I think it definitely falls into contention for being among DreamWorks' best franchises. Obviously, not the most profitable because Shrek exists, and even if I don't like 3 and I think 4 was merely okay, they are still swimming in cash and riding off the coattails of the earlier films. But really, in terms of quality of the franchise overall, How to Train Your Dragon really does sit at the pinnacle of DreamWorks' filmography. But beyond even looking at it from a critical perspective, I think that narratively, these films are just so deep and they tell really meaningful stories compared to a lot of other DreamWorks efforts. I mean, the first one never fails to get me in my feels. It tells the story of Hiccup, a Viking who lives on the island of Berk with his father, the chief, and his people, who feels like a bit of a disappointment. His whole culture revolves around battle and bloodshed, around hunting and killing dragons, around becoming a vicious and bloodthirsty warrior who can defeat any foe. He wants to prove himself worthy of being a member of the village, and he especially wants to prove himself to his dad, with whom he has a strained relationship due to his supposed weakness. His dad hates dragons, especially with the supposed death of his mother when Hiccup was a baby. So Hiccup thinks the only way to earn that love back is to be a warrior. But he can't, because he isn't one. But still he tries, and so he uses his brain to shoot down the rarest, most elusive species of dragon, and tries to finish it off himself. Only to find that he's not that kind of person, that he simply can't do it. And from here the film pivots to become a touching story of friendship against the odds, challenging cultural viewpoints, rising above prejudice and reconciling with family. It very quickly becomes very beautiful and unexpectedly emotional and just draws you in on a deeper level than I expected going into it. And then this is followed up with the second film, which, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't received quite as well as the original, but in all honesty is actually my favourite of the trilogy. And honestly, a lot of the themes in this film are pretty similar to the first. We still have that cultural heritage they have to fight against, but this time it's in the form of Drago and his dragon hunters who want to enslave them and use them as weapons. We still have family reconciliation in the form of Hiccup's mum being revealed as alive and in hiding. And we still have the epic action, the comedy, the drama. Everything that was great in the first film was in this one too. Perhaps you might not think it was done as well, but the elements are still there, with some added tragedy thrown into the mix for good measure with the death of Stoic, Hiccup's father, during one of the film's climactic moments. And then we come to 3, which is my personal least favourite of the films, but a film that is still good and still keeps up the quality of the franchise as a whole. I know there are a lot of complaints about Hiccup's arc in this film, with him being, a bit whiny and all, but honestly, I do see where he's coming from in this story. And the film does tell a compelling tale about letting go of relationships and people so that they can find their own happiness. And then that ending, yes. Quite the tearjerker in my view. So yes, whilst this is probably the weakest of the trilogy, if your worst film is this good, it kind of proves that your franchise is golden. So that really is the reasoning behind why I think How to Train Your Dragon's the greatest of the franchises, or at least why I think it should be considered top dog. Top Dragon? Alpha Dragon? Yeah. It has an emotional story, great animation and world design, was commercially successful, and maintained a consistent quality through each major installment. And simply by process of elimination, I don't think any of the other major franchises that DreamWorks has can really live up to those expectations. And we'll start off with Shrek. Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. Classic films. Truly classic. Probably my favourite DreamWorks films bar none. They came at a time where the studio wasn't really all that prominent, and firmly positioned them as one of the animation power studios alongside Disney Animation and Pixar. They were the alternative to the House of Mouse, and this firmly put them on the map. And if the franchise was just these two films and maybe those specials that they made, I would make a very strong argument that this is the premier franchise, because it's all there. Excellent story, deep themes, good animation for the time, box office sensation, critically beloved, and Jesus, this is how it would have been remembered. But then the third one came out, and the fourth. Films that were clearly not living up to the hype and really tarnished the reputation of the franchise as a whole. So that kind of ensured that whilst the first two Shrek films are some of the greatest animated films ever made, that the franchise it spawned certainly isn't. Because there's always that caveat. Oh, I love Shrek, but I don't like the sequels, etc. So this takes us to the second major franchise, Madagascar. And I think it's quite obvious from the get-go that this franchise just doesn't compare. Although, apparently the world did not like the first Madagascar film very much. It has a 50-something on Rotten Tomatoes, but I love that film. I have a shit ton of childhood nostalgia wrapped up in this film, and now my heart is broken. But anyway, the second film, whilst apparently considered better, is still only in the 60s, and then the third one, the World Tour, the one about the circus, the one you'd expect to be trash, is actually considered the best from a critical perspective, but still only in the 70s, and also deeply forgettable despite that, and as commercial success. So yeah, this franchise, whilst actually better than you'd expect, still isn't the pinnacle. Spirit, Trolls, Croods, Boss Baby, it's a no from me. I just feel like those films really don't have the same impact even as Madagascar, or Kung Fu Panda, or How to Train Your Dragon, or Shrek. I mean, the first Spirit movie is underrated, and you'll never convince me otherwise. But the second one is apparently bad. Truly terrible, although I've not seen it. Trolls and Croods, yeah, I think they're decent, but they're ultimately forgettable. They don't make an impact like DreamWorks' earlier franchises, and honestly, Boss Baby is no good in my opinion. I just do not rate it. So really, that leaves one franchise who can challenge for the crown. One franchise that might be able to say it's the pinnacle of DreamWorks animation. One franchise that can stand head and shoulders above the rest, Kung Fu Panda. And damn, Kung Fu Panda is good. It has it all. A very good critical response with every film above 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Each film was a commercial smash hit, had great animation, great visual style, and excellent storylines that interweave with each other. They don't feel samey, and they see the characters evolve in clear and defined ways that make sense in the context of the story being told. They really work hard on character development in these films. Everything just fires on all cylinders. So that leaves me in a conundrum. Which is better? Because honestly, whilst the Rotten Tomato scores would suggest How to Train Your Dragon, my own personal views are a lot more muddled. So for the tiebreaker, I had to think about the shows and the specials and the shorts. And honestly, once you do this, I think there really is not that much comparison. How to Train Your Dragon really hits with that sort of thing. Don't get me wrong, Kung Fu Panda's good at it too, but I just don't think it hits quite on that same level. Hell, it may even just be to do with the fact that they don't have the right voice actors, because Jack Black's probably expensive as hell. Who knows, but all I know is that I much prefer the cohesive storytelling in How to Train Your Dragon shows as opposed to the Kung Fu Monster of the Week. So yeah, there you go. That's really all I have to say about that. I hope I've been somewhat able to convince you of my point of view, but if not, I'll just remind you that these have been my opinions. And now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think the best DreamWorks franchise is? Do you agree with me, or do you have something else in mind? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.